The Summoned Queen, by Taapje. Published, 2024. Words, 88,466. Status, complete. Summary. It's been 7 years since the upheaval, and Hyrule is in the midst of a renaissance. The world and its culture are rebuilding, and the people are more than happy to leave their calamities in the past and indulge in peace. In this spirit, Princess Zelda and her hero have largely retreated into the distance, building a quieter life of their own choosing. This idyllic era is shattered as a vanquished evil once again rises, re-energized and possessing a fresh perspective on his power and how he can best wield it. Ganondorf is no longer content to annihilate the land and his foes. He wants to draw out the kingdom's darkest potential, no more so than in Princess Zelda herself. Chapter 1. The fresh strawberry juice stained Zelda's fingers as she plucked the last fruit from the plate, saving it in her grip from Link finding it first. He would give her everything, save for the last bite of dinner. Even the faithful chosen knight of Hyrule had a line in his loyalty.
"We've had more berries this year, haven't we?"
she noted, distracting him from the now empty dish. It was the 7th spring after the upheaval, their 5th turning over the dirt in the house on the outskirts of Hateno village, against a cliff and across its own bridge, easy to spot with its crooked chimney, but an effort to reach. A compromise, giving the townspeople and travelers a glimpse of their lives without the invitation to an interruption. A tentative, unspoken peace they'd brokered after destiny granted them the breath to breathe. From here on the roof they watched the sun slip down between the split of dueling peaks. In that moment the sky flushed an emerald blaze she'd trained her eyes to catch, unblinking for almost a minute, refusing to let it crest without her. It was a silly tradition, one she couldn't remember now how it had begun. Most likely the little cottage house had grown too hot in the summer swelter, the grass of the yard too dry. The cool air off the creek spun up and around the thatching, and the sound of hot-footed frogs and fireflies calling out to one another soothed her. The openness of the sky, the way she could trace the entire path of the moon as it shepherded in one day from the next. And still, the solid anchor of home beneath her, tethering her back to this world, this man, this life. Link nodded, swallowing his last mouthful of cheese.
"Most of the time slugs get to them first. Tell me,"
she nudged, dipping her shoulder into his arm.
"how did you win in a race against slugs?"
He reached down between his legs for an almost empty bottle that he held aloft in a solitary toast.
"Ale? Kakariko Pilsner,"
he said, taking the last warm swill, letting the amber-colored glass dangle from his fingertips.
"The only thing more irresistible to slugs. They love it so much, they'll drown themselves just to stay in that sweet, sugary bliss." "Where'd you pick that tidbit up?"
she asked, a wry smile on her lips.
"Dedicated research. You're not the only one with a library card,"
he said, snatching the strawberry right out of her grip and scarfing it down before she stood a chance.
"Link?"
she shrieked, pretending to pry open his lips.
"That was mine. Gardening tax."
He shrugged.
"You should really talk to someone in charge about that. The price of getting ahead in this kingdom's getting out of control."
From the stable shed below, Zelda heard her horse Storm whinny in protest, anxious at her mistress' cries. Link's beloved steed Epona grunted, beating the dirt with her hooves, berating them all for the interruption.
All right,
Zelda called, nudging herself down toward the front door's pergola.
"We're coming down. You can have your yard back."
Link instinctively reached to grab her hand and ease her down off the roof's slope, but she batted it away, dropping herself slowly until her tiptoes met the wood.
"Unhand me at once, vile knave. I don't consort with thieves."
He bit back his response, savoring every moment of her awkward shimmy down the post to disappear into the waiting sanctuary below. Open your eyes. The breeze on Zelda's exposed skin was cold, almost numbing as she stirred from sleep. She endured it as long as she could, tugging at the pillowy ostrich-down blanket with her eyelids squeezed shut, the half-dream logic insisting that as long as she kept them from parting, she could drift straight back into warm, wonderful sleep. She nudged her back closer to the left side of the bed, trying to steal a bit of Link's radiating snugness for her own nefarious comfort. "Open your eyes." With a groan, she squinted into the loft, the shapes and textured shadows arranging themselves into a home that was so effortlessly familiar in the light. The moonless darkness hinted at the space between much too late and much too early. She rarely glimpsed this hour, maybe a handful of times in her adult life. During her childhood, the less charitable maids and governesses that flittered in and out of castle employment had weaponized the dead of night with stories of what lurked underneath the foundation of her home. What could only find her when the moon was this high in the sky?
"You don't know why this castle is here, do you?"
They taunted, an eyebrow raised at her wide eyes staring back, still so many years away from understanding. Even here in this most familiar of places, on an evening otherwise indistinguishable from all others, something in the furthest depths of her mind twitched relentlessly, a primal command that would not be quieted. She scanned the small loft, with its desk still cluttered with her growing collection of notebooks, and pictures tracing an emerging lifetime hanging neatly from the wall. Everything was as it had been, as it should be, except that breeze. Straight across from the bed, the gauzy white curtains gently fluttered, like the flags standing sentinel atop each of Hyrule Castle's spires. The loft window was wide open, letting the night spill in and over and around. The sight of the absent glass pane, swung wide from its hinge, felt like a hummingbird let loose in her heart.
"Link,"
she whispered, her hand sliding over to rest the hero awake. In her periphery she caught his profile already raised, the master sword's hilt within his grip. His shoulders were ribbed sharply, a startled elk in a glen. His chest was still as he held his breath, vibrating with power to strike. It was then that she noticed the silence. Not the familiar hum of night, punctuated with the distant stirs of busy wild creatures, and the muted sound of the occasional wagon creaking down Hatno Village's road. This soundlessness was absolute, not a rest from the day, but the absence of life itself. She shifted slightly forward to catch a glimpse from over the rail of the loft, but Link's left arm raised at her waist, compelling her to stillness. The worn polish of his leather gauntlets was out of place here in the stripped respite of bed. A familiar presence wandered into the wrong room, scaling up the night's unease. In the minimal space between the home stir and Zelda's waking, Link had yanked on his tunic and boots, the ones folded at the ready each night beside him, a hard-wired habit from his earliest training as a royal knight. For all these years she'd found the pattern amusing, an endearing callback to a past that now felt unimaginably distant, the time before they knew each other. In all that subsequent time, she'd yet to see him put it in practice. In that moment, a tittering laughter cracked the emptiness. Her mind scrambled to excuse it at first. It seemed far and removed, enough to be a trick of the imagination. Maybe something down in the well. Last winter she'd forgotten to seal her study up properly, and a swarm of keys took up residence. Squirrels had a bad habit of chasing each other up and out the chimney. But in between each of her shallow breaths she could feel the throaty laughter growing closer and louder, until it rattled her eardrum. Link's fingers ferociously gripped her wrist, until his nails scraped half-moons into her skin. A burst of the chilling air sent the curtains sailing up toward the ceiling, drifting down again to cloak a mountainous figure radiating with a relentless red glow. His demon cat-eye slits cut through the dreamlike darkness, boring intently into the awakened princess and her knight. End of chapter.